Well, let's start with a video. I mean, because so Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson is
Just
as a lot of
Republican mayors?
well,
I don't
few
believe.
and far between.
Sure. I'm curious
Dal-
what that is.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for it, but I think so. With Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson kind of making his recent conversion and also launching a Republican Mayors Association, his goal is to make more Republican mayors and start to change that tide that we've seen. I think there are a lot of reasons why, but you want to start with the clip and then kind of get into the discussion?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Or fiscal conservatives and law and order, people who have conservative principles, basically Republican principles, running for office at the local level, and particularly for mayor. We need more Republican mayors. We can't afford to let the cities look like they look right now. From San Francisco to Chicago to Philadelphia to DC, the news is filled every day with all this out of control, lawless behavior. It's because, again, it's a culture of lawlessness. It's lax DAs on the Democratic side, and it's local leaders, mayors on the Democratic side who've just created this environment.
Well, yes.
Is this Michael? Is this a hint? Did you set Charles up for this?
No, it's just the universe. It's God.
The universe is telling me something. Right. So what's the story? So just in case people don't know, what's his name? Eric Johnson?
Yeah, Mayor of
Yes.
Dallas.
Mayor of Dallas. He was a Democrat, registered Democrat, and then he changed party affiliation to Republican.
He
Now,
served state house as a Democrat, and then became mayor, and then changed. Now he's a Republican.
My question is, does this matter? Did his politics change?
I don't think so, because for a long time, he's been at odds with his Democratic colleague when he was a Democrat, his Democratic colleagues on council. And, he had, so at his last inauguration, he had Ted Cruz and John Cornyn, Senator Ted Cruz and John Cornyn swear him in. So, I mean, he's kind of been like dancing on the line for a while. And I think people maybe not expected this, but more or less kind of just assumed that he was a Republican, but still just going by Democrat. And then I know when he switched, the Democrats came out and said that he hadn't kind of interacted or engaged with the Dallas Democrats in a really long time. So I think many people probably expected this. Still a big deal just because he's now Dallas is the biggest city ran by a Republican mayor. I mean, it's the first largest city run by a Republican mayor, the ninth largest city altogether. And so it's nice to see a trend, but does his politics change? I don't think so.
So he just came out of the closet.
Well, did he I'll ask you both. Did he have a genuine red pill moment, or is this political opportunism?
Well, that's what I mean. That's sort of, I guess that's a more interesting way of asking my question. Did he have a red pill moment? Did he look into 9/11 and, now he thinks that it was an inside job or something? Or did he listen to Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan and now he thinks that Atlantis was real? What did something happen? Or is he just like, this is the way I've always been? And, I don't know why I was a Democrat.
Well, if you look at the facts, and then I'll let Charles respond to that question. He's elected in mayor 2019, right?
Yeah.
Then the COVID lockdowns happen. All the homeless situation gets crazy. The defund the police happens in 2020, and then he's now. So looking at that, you could say reasonably, maybe he did legitimately be like, my party's lost, and there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm switching. But what do you think, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a part of it. I think also, I remember when he did run, there was a lot of conversation, or at least just commentary from Republicans saying that, he's probably, because he ran against Jason Viabla, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a conversation about who's better and who Republicans would support. And there was kind of like milquetoast support for him because he was the lesser of two evils. I mean, he was somewhat of a conservative Democrat in the legislature from what I heard. And so I think he had been trending there. And then you get to the point that you mentioned with COVID lockdowns, with kind of the national trends. I mean, we're seeing border sheriffs and people and DAs at the border changing parties. We're seeing it happen in the Hispanic community. Not so much in the Black community yet. Maybe he's going to kind of break that dam. We'll see. But I do think that you're seeing a shifting in the Democratic Party. And at some point, he probably just felt that he could no longer identify with him. I don't know if it was like one moment in particular, but I do know that during the defund the police thing, he got really into it with his council because they tried to move to defund the police. I think they might have been successful, but he was in opposition to that. More recently, he tried to cut taxes. I think he wanted to go to the no new revenue rate. His council fought him against that. He lost. And so he's been trying to do stuff and he keeps losing. So yeah, I don't know if it makes a huge difference though, because unlike Houston, Dallas isn't really like a strong mayor form of government. So it's not like he can just bring down the hammer and start passing all these conservative policies. He's still got to work with these guys. But I think for the culture, it might make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I would think for the culture it would make. I mean, it feels nice, right? That there's a Republican mayor of a big city. I don't know. You know, it kind of sounds like this is just sort of the way he always was. Like he was sort of like he's fine with like a little social safety net, like but not too much, right? And then, you know, he wants public safety and, you know, wants to maybe protect the middle class, like maybe an old school Democrat. I don't know, right? And then but that's not what they are anymore. They just went way too progressive, and so now he's all right. I'm just gonna be a Republican. Is that what happened?
Well, I think for a lot of older Black people, and I wouldn't say he's older. I mean, I think he's probably like 45 or something. But for a lot of older Black people, I think they felt that way, that they long sided with the Democratic Party. But with some of the stuff you're saying today, they just, I mean, it's kind of a little bit beyond the pale. I mean, even look at Sean Theory when she supported the bill prohibiting minors from taking gender affirming care. She got ripped apart by people on Twitter. But she like kind of talked about it from her perspective and her community and saying that this is just not what I support. And she kind of laid out some really thoughtful reasons. But, the Twitter trolls attacked her. But, I think in the community, she still gets support. So I think you have this like older Black Democratic contingent that no longer sides with the Democratic Party, except for many of them, it's just too hard to actually flip over and say that they're going to support someone else, unfortunately.
Yeah. They're much more socially conservative. We have that with Ora Houston's a little bit like that. Former council member here in Austin. She's an old school Black Democrat, and she's kind of the same style. I think in terms of effectiveness, switching parties on a body of majority Democrats, I don't know that it'll necessarily make him more effective. But if you look at like more broadly, what's plaguing our big cities, an ideologically conservative person is kind of what a city needs. Like we need to refocus on basics, public safety. We need to do it in a fiscally conservative way. And we really just need to fill potholes rather than solving every social ill. I think conceptually it makes sense, but then you got to think about implementation. He's isolated himself on a body that's, like I said, majority Democrats. And now he's not going to get anything done. So he would have been better if he was trying to be effective, staying in the party and pushing the same policies rather than switching. So the switching seems to be a little bit of a middle finger. And maybe he wants to run for something statewide. I saw a lot of suggestions. That's what he's doing.
But didn't you? I think he was in the state legislature.
He used to be, state legislature. But I'm saying, statewide, where maybe he's run or a bigger office.
Senator,
maybe.
Governor.
Good luck.
Why do you say that? Why do you say good luck? Is that like a genuine good luck, man? I want you to do well, or is that like a good luck?
There's like lots of people that want to be the next governor. Sorry, I put my
name one.
Dan Patrick.
Oh fuck. When you said we need a conservative, whatever the problems in cities. I mean, I was really hoping that you'd say like we got to get rid of these EMBs. They're just fucking everything up. These urbanists, right?
No, I mean,
aren't urbanists the worst?
But they're not.
No, aren't they the worst?
They're not. What you see in Austin is not urbanism. It is progressives. It's progressivism disguising itself in urbanism.
Hey, no true Scotsman isn't going to work on me. All right, bud.
That's the difference. These are in most part, and I say this endearingly because I like a lot of them and they're friends, but these are on personal level, I get along with them as well. It's fine. Yeah. These are rabid progressives who want to social engineer the city, and not just on land use policy and transit, but on equity and all the other things.
It's all tied together. You cannot divorce those things in their minds. Equity, environmentalism, minimum wage, workers' rights, all of it is tied into land use policy and high density and, building an apartment complex, turning Terrytown into an apartment complex.
Yeah, but Charles, do you understand that to be urbanism, or is that Austin's form of urbanism?
Yeah, I think that's Austin's former. I feel like they manipulated urbanism to kind of fit their needs. I think kind of genuine urbanism is focused more on, you find a lot of free market folks kind of in that urbanist community who are pushing for that stuff, who ideologically would probably be opposed to some of these progressives, but for on some of these issues like minimum lot sizes and, zoning reform and other things like that, permitting reform, these things that are genuine, that are really going to affect the cost of housing. Like, I feel like that's where a lot of urbanists keep themselves. And then where you can see this progressive shift is when they start talking about a lot of the social stuff. And then, like you said, tying it into urbanism, all for a broader form of social justice or racial equity or whatever it is that they want to call it.
Yeah. Plus the political play. You know who likes urbanism? Real estate developers.
Yeah, they do.
And they can fund campaigns. So there's a nexus there that's happening in Austin. I don't know if it's happening in Houston or Dallas. That is intentional.
Well, I just want to say, because I spoke with Nicole Nosek, who I believe Charles knows probably well, yep. Right? You're both on the board members of Texans for Reasonable Solutions. I think Texans for Reasonable Solutions is a lot more reasonable than, say, many of the urbanists and all. I'm not going to name names, right? But many of the
urbanists, reasonable solutions.
Yeah, it's politics. So, is it? Can I rely on the name? I don't know. But I have to ask, Charles.
Yeah,
I'm ashamed that I didn't ask Nicole when I talked to her on my podcast. Do you know Grimes?
No, I don't know Grimes. I know who Grimes is, but no, I don't know.
She's advisors to the board. She's an advisor to the board. How do you not? Why would you join the board without the stipulation that you get to meet Grimes?
Good question. Good question. Good question. Nicole, I believe, knows Grimes. So yes, you could have that conversation with her. Listen, and I live in Houston, so the only people I know kind of are from. I actually don't really know anybody, so I can't even point to that.
You're on the board with Nicole Nosek. It's you, Nicole Nosek, and John Mackey. What a board! What a board! How did you get that gig?
Well, me and Nicole.
Don't take it that way. You deserve it, but there's a lot of people that deserve a lot of things that don't get them. How'd you do it?
Well, I think during the legislative session, me and Nicole got pretty close because I was supporting all the stuff that she was working on, and we had tried to work prior to the session on different issue areas and what those bills were going to look like, and then just kind of supported each other ever since. And then she asked me if I would join the board, and I was very glad to, because I think it's a great organization. And for the point that you made, I think a lot of the quote unquote urbanists today have manipulated what urbanism means. And so when you go to the legislature, they hear what you're talking about, kind of the social equity, racial justice, racial equity thing. But the point is to kind of get them back to reasonable solutions, like talking about what actual land use reform looks like, why conservatives should support land use reform, why housing is unaffordable right now, and how we can use the free market to make it more affordable. And so I definitely wholly align with that. And when you have to go arm in arm with a progressive to convince them of it, so be it. But I think it's a great opportunity to steal back that language, if you will, and get people to understand.
Hear, hear.
I want Grimes on this show, within a month.
Brad's very laser focused, but if you look at the policy there, the city of Austin has a rule that says if you have a lot that is smaller than 5,750 square feet, you can't build on it. Why should the city be regulating the market to that extent? If you're a conservative, right, you can have deed restrictions or neighborhood rules or whatever to regulate that if you want. But why is the government saying if your lot is not bigger?
The government's saying everything else. All right. I get it. I get your point, and I agree with it on principle. In principle, but in practice, it doesn't work, because they control all of the other property, all of it. They control all the other infrastructure, the roads, the road capacities, the water and the electricity, and everything else, all of it. Right. And so, so they built out this infrastructure, and now they're saying, okay, well, this happened in the city of Austin. This is happening right now. I don't know if you're aware of this, Charles, but we have Leslie Poole's home initiative, housing options for middle income earners or something totally insane. And so, they're changing the definition of a single family lot from 5,600 square feet, 5,600 square feet down to 2,500 square feet. And on the new definition of a single family lot, you can build 3 homes, right? So 3 structures on a lot less than half the size. Okay, that's wild, right? You've already made the infrastructure. You've already designed the city this way. You've already done this. And people love it. This is what they bought into, right? I bought into this neighborhood. It's a single family neighborhood. I bought into it. It's what I want. It's what I like. It's what my neighbors want.
But if you want that, if you want that and your neighbors want that, why don't you go out and form an HOA or get a deed restriction and then make your neighborhood that way? You could still preserve it.
Oh my God.
Why should people be automatically precluded from doing what they want with their property because Austin says so? You still have the option. No. You still have the option. I'm just saying, you still have the option of stopping it.
PSA, Brad's a NIMBY.
I'm happy to call myself a NIMBY. I don't give a. We're all NIMBYs. I don't care. All the YIMBYs in Austin, they're like, oh, you're such a fucking NIMBY. You don't want people to own homes. Fuck you. They're trying to build a highway, and you're like trying to stop it from happening because you're a NIMBY for highways. At the end of the day, look, when it comes down to it, we don't live in a property rights utopia, right? I wish we did, but we don't. What my neighbors do to their yard in a property rights utopia, what they do to their property could very well affect the value of my property, and I might have recourse for that. I very well could. I probably would. But in this scenario, what they do with their property that affects my property, because it's within what the city of Austin is saying is okay, I don't have any recourse. I can't do shit about it, right? There's no property rights that I can exercise except for, like, well, now I can just build more on my property and fucking like ruin this neighborhood. You can get a deed restriction. And then to enforce it, I got to spend tons of money in this Byzantium, court system I could lose. Like, it's not. That's not great. Look, if the city of Austin or whatever had started out, you buy the land, buy as much land you want, build whatever the fuck you want on. I don't care. That's the way it started. Great, but that's not what they're. This is all tied into, the UN Agenda 2030 and what are 15-minute cities and environmentalism and mass transit, and that's why they got to have Project Connect. If they have Project Connect, now they have to make everything dense because they're not going to get federal money if they don't make things more dense. Like, don't throw out good policy because a couple of people are using it to try to do something that you disagree with. Good policy on its face, in it by itself, is still good policy, regardless of who is, kind of manipulating it for what they want. To your point about going to the court system, the next thing you guys need to do in the city of Austin is what we did. Well, we didn't do it. They did it decades ago in Houston. So since we don't have zoning, when you go to enforce an HOA restriction or something like that, the city legal takes ownership of it, and you just kind of file the complaint with city legal, and then they'll pay for the prosecution or the enforcement of it, rather than having the individual homeowner have to. I know most places the individual homeowner has to go file a civil suit or something, but because we don't have that, the city of Houston will take ownership over that. So you guys can make the city of Austin legal department enforce it, and I guess through a petition or something. I don't know how you would get to that point, but there are options for everything. We could get to that property rights utopia. We're not going to get to it. Let me just roll it back a little bit. The Texans for Reasonable Solutions, Nicole Nosek, my conference, I think that was a better direction, like I said, than what the urbanists here in Austin. I think we're talking about local issues right now. I don't know, local and state. We're talking about Republican mayors. I know, right? And so, we had this big meeting yesterday, and everyone is talking about, we got to make all these housing options because it's going to make things more affordable. But what are you? Show me a place that's more dense and cheaper.
Well, I will give you this, that when you build as you build up, yeah, material gets a little more expensive because of things that you have to do for like safety and stuff like that. So I'm not going to say that density is necessarily the solution. However, if the market demands density, then who are we to stand in the way?
Brad, in every market that exists, more supply brings down price.
Oh, I know.
In every market.
Yep.
It applies to the housing market as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be dense. You could go the Judge Glock direction, who's like, greenfield, blow it up, build everywhere. You don't necessarily need to build dense housing, but in order to deal with the price, there has to be an increase in supply. And that's where
agreed. 100% agree.
Minimum lot size, you can get infill or multiple units or ADUs or like some of these more, I think, free market and reasonable solutions. The case for them is not density and you're going to have transit. The case for them is economic growth, free markets, property rights. That's why we do it, not because I want to train.
Tell me, I mean, all that is great. You're preaching to the choir. Like, I am for those things, but we don't have those things, and we're not going to have those things with this change that they're doing. It's not going to have, like, Judge Glock is, a great guy. I don't know if people know who he is or not. He's with the Manhattan Institute. He wrote a book. I actually have it right here. The Dead Pledge, Judge Glock. He's not a judge. His name is Judge. It took me a little while to figure out, so I'm just clarifying for everybody. He's fine. I mean, density makes sense in some cases. Downtown Austin, dense makes sense. But throw some sprawl in there, like build out a little bit, have some municipal competition is what he also advocates for.
Yes.
At the end of the day, there's nothing. It's not. What I want is not going to happen. I'm gonna get railroaded in this. I'm gonna wake up. I'm gonna be sore. It's gonna hurt. I'm not gonna be able to sit down. It's gonna hurt that bad. All right. So who cares? It's just not gonna happen. It's not gonna get cheaper. It's at the end of the day, it's not gonna get cheaper. No, it's not going to. It's not gonna work. Why is New York more expensive? Los Angeles, San Francisco, Shanghai, Tokyo. I mean, why is San Antonio less cheap? And
well, I mean, New York is because you got only so much land. Same thing with San Francisco.
You didn't go far enough. Is that what you're going to tell me, Charles?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, I'm saying you got this like small island. You can't keep building. I think sprawl is great. Like, I'm a fan of sprawl. I think Austin should sprawl out too, but you have a lot of this land that's taken, I think, owned by the government for whatever reason that they don't let you build on. And I think a lot of cities, they do these belts around the city where they don't let you build. Like, let people build in the unincorporated areas. I think that is great. Houston is a sprawling metropolis that takes me 2 hours to drive across, and I love every moment.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why you sound like a crazy person now. So edit that part out. Otherwise, you were on a roll.
We don't want to suffer from the same mental syndrome that the left suffers from, that just because it's coming from a certain source means it's a bad idea.
Why do you think that that's what I'm saying? I haven't said it once that just because a YIMBY promotes it that I'm against it. I haven't even indicated
you got YIMBY derangement syndrome there, bud.
No, I don't.
This was a great conversation about Republican mayors. Should we transition?
Well, I mean, I think it has to do with Republican mayors. All right, Michael was saying that. Let me tie this together. Let me use my podcast and radio experience. I'll tie this little together.
It's yours.
I was talking about, this is what some conservatism is what cities need, right? They need a little bit of conservatism because they're going buck wild on all sorts of social issues. There's, Trans Kids Day or whatever in Austin, right? It's half off to get your genitals lopped at the clinic. And so, all right, some conservatism is good. And last night in Austin, we just had this big YIMBY convention down at City Hall where people did this very performative act. They went and they spoke to their council members and planning commissioners. They spoke to them. Well, who gives a shit? It's not what is not unprecedented, Michael, is that none of them listened. That's not unprecedented. Doesn't matter. It was performative. Maybe it was cathartic to get out there and say, Kirk Watson and Leslie Poole, you guys, you used to be all for your neighborhoods and now you're not. Who cares? They didn't listen. They don't care. It's a waste of time. It would be great if they had to like talk with you and respond, because then there would be proof of thought. But there's no proof of thought. As far as I know, they haven't thought about it at all. So anyhow, is this, what would Eric, is this like, where would a conservative fall on this? Because this is the direction that cities all over America are going, is more dense, more dense, more dense. Is it is it a reasonable policy that just happens to be catching on, that, Democratic Mayors of America, that association is really pushing, or does it have to do with UN Agenda 2030 and 15-minute cities, or is it somewhere in the middle? What would Eric Johnson or any conservative, if I ran for mayor in Austin, what would be the conservative thing to do? How would I approach this?
I think the first place you start, and they always talk about it but never do anything, is the development process, the costs and the time associated with building. According to the National Home Builders Association, 27% of the cost of a new home, 27%, is government regulation and process. So if you could bring that down a little bit, you can protect your neighborhoods, but also address the cost side of the equation when it comes to housing. That would be an easy win for a mayor, but we have now 2 reports, the Zucker in Austin, we have the Zucker, and then they just did another report about how to streamline the process, and nothing will happen because they have their little fiefdoms in development services that don't want to give up power. And so that's where a Republican mayor could go.
And that, right. They all ran on that in this last election cycle. We're going to clean up that process. Well, why the fuck didn't the last council do that? No one's going to do it.
They've been saying it for a decade, but I didn't mean to interrupt. That could be something they can actually do.
Yeah. And I think even on the idea about reducing minimum lot sizes. So, I mean, we don't have a conservative mayor in Houston, but a thing the city of Houston is doing is they do these clinics with, I think it's like city legal and planning, where they go out to a community who does want to do a deed restriction, and they kind of work with them through the process to make it easier, to make it, less costly to do that. So they're giving you the tools and the resources to then protect your community if that's something you want. And so I think a conservative mayor would do something like that, would kind of maybe, move towards a permitting reform, do the development cost thing, but also maybe reduce minimum lot sizes, but make it easier for communities who do want to have some sort of protection, whether it's through HOA or deed restriction, or even something else, some other covenant that they want to put in place, make that easier for them and lower the barrier to be able to do that. So I think there's ways of splitting the baby here without just, throwing...
Excuse me? What, pardon me?
Without just throwing everything out, I've said my piece.
Is that a thing? Split the baby?
Yeah. Isn't that a phrase? Yeah. Okay. I thought it was crazy for a second. That's a phrase. Yeah.
Is it? I don't think I've ever heard it, but I get it. That works for me. I don't know that I'll use it, but I know it. I'll use it. I'll figure it. I'll work it in. I was gonna say something, and then I got distracted by split the baby. Gosh darn it! That's a good one. Gosh darn it! Whatever. I don't know. Maybe it'll come to me. Maybe it won't. Who cares? It could have been the best part of the show, but maybe not.